All right, so yesterday we did the first day of the lesson. Today we're finishing the lesson because we didn't finish it yesterday. And it's about completing the square. So here's some steps that are involved in that, and these are what you would be tested on. Is can you do these steps? Can you memorize these steps? That's mostly what we're focusing on for the test. So like we might have like a problem worked out with like blanks in it, and you would have to fill in the blank with whatever number goes there. Or like a good question would be, what number would have to be added to both sides to complete the square, or something like that. All right, because yes, these problems can be solved other ways, and you might find that those other ways are easier. But if it's specifically asking about like a process that has to do with completing the square, make sure you know that process. So that includes rewriting the quadratic into this format, taking half of whatever the b value is, squaring it and adding it to both sides, factoring the trinomial, taking the square root of both sides, and then simplifying the radicals. So here's the videos from last year. Here's some review on how to simplify radicals. If you want the day one video, just go to yesterday's slides, you'll find it there. And then I'm recording now and I'll upload that later as well. The practice is the same as yesterday, just one worksheet for the 2 days. We're gonna finish the worksheet today and upload it to Schoology. You will also have an exit ticket just for questions about what we've learned. So it should be, easy points there. And the upcoming assessments and deadlines. Tomorrow we have an opening in our schedule to do some Module 8 test corrections and retakes. So be prepared for that. Make sure you have your notes tomorrow. We'll review the test, talk about it, and then you'll have an opportunity tomorrow in class to make your score better. You could also choose to do it like at a later date as well, but like tomorrow I'm getting class time for it, so no one has the option to do nothing tomorrow. All right, and then the Module 9 quiz is scheduled for Monday, and deadline for late work from Orange folders is Friday next week. Any questions? All right, so then back to this lesson, and we will start off. We did not do number 6 yesterday, did we? I don't think we did. So we're going to start off with that one, just to kind of refresh our memory from what we did yesterday before we get into like these more complicated ones, if you will. All right, so the step-by-step for this is written down here, right? These would be the steps that you have to memorize for a test. I'm going to also write them on this side because, again, we're really focusing in on the process for this lesson. All right, and we're starting with number 6 because we did number 5 yesterday. So the first step is to rewrite this quadratic equation. Right now it's in standard form, but in order to solve it by completing the square, we want it to be in this form. ax squared plus bx equals to c. So we don't want any constants on the left side, no single numbers on the left side. We want it on the right side of the equal sign. So what number has to be moved in order to make that happen? This minus 5, right? Now I can't just, rewrite this equation. I can't just write it like this, right? I can't just pick it up and move it. I have to go through a process so that we're not just making new equations. All right, so how would I move that -5? How can I make it cancel out on the left side? All right, I'll add 5, because -5 plus 5 is 0. To maintain the equation, to make sure we're not making stuff up, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So I'm also going to add it to the right side as well. All right, on the left side, negative 5 plus 5 is 0, so that cancels. On the left side, we have x squared plus 4x equals, what's 0 plus 5? 5. All right, so now it's in the format that we need to do the completing the square. All right, step 2, I know is kind of a weird step, but that's how we get this side over here to become a perfect square trinomial. That's what completing the square means. So the second step says that we're going to take half of whatever b is, we're going to square it, then add to both sides. All right, that's what it says. That's what you would have to memorize. So I'm going to take half of whatever the b value is. What number is in the b spot, according to this? 4, right? So the number in front of the x is 4, so that's our b value. We're going to take half of it. What's half of 4? 2. We're going to square it. What's 2 squared? 4. All right, so for this one, it just happens to be the same as what we originally had, but you still have to go through this process. All right, what do I do with that 4 according to the instructions? Add it to both sides. I'm going to add it to the left side of the equal sign and to the right side. All right, what do I have left side of the room? Or right side for you guys. On this side of the equal sign, can I combine the 4 with something? Is there any like terms that I can combine it with? Can I combine it with the x squared? Can I combine it with the 4x? No, because they're not like terms. So we're just going to rewrite it. On the right side, what's 5 plus 4? Can I combine those? And when I combine them, I get 9. All right, notice now we have a perfect square trinomial. All right, now we can factor it using that same way that we did yesterday in the warm-up. So number 3 would be to factor the trinomial. All right, with perfect square trinomials, it's really easy. I can take the square root of the first and last term. What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 4? 2. So I get x and 2. What symbol goes in between them? The plus sign, because the middle term has a plus sign. All right, so we factor the trinomial, bring down the 9, so it doesn't just go away. Question so far? All right, the last step is simply solve for the x. All right, and anytime that we're solving for x, we're undoing what's being done. So start with what's farthest from the x, which would be to the power of 2. What's the opposite of squaring something? To take the square root. All right, doing that basically cancels this out. So what do I have on the left side? Just x plus 2. All right, and then to maintain this equality, like I said before, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So I'm also going to take the square root of 9. What would the square root of 9 be? 3. And then don't forget, I want you to get used to this. It's going to be plus or minus 3. That's a plus or minus symbol. Meaning that It could be 3 times 3, that's the square root of 9, or negative 3 times negative 3. That's the square root of 9. All right. I've been having you guys break these into separate equations. I'll do that over here because I'm out of room. But I have x plus 2 equal to 3, so that's the plus 3 portion of this. And x plus 2 equal to negative 3. All right, and solve for x in both situations. So what would be the opposite of adding 2? So do that and do it on both sides. You'll do it on this side for this equation as well. It cancels out on the left side. That was the whole purpose of doing that. 2 minus 2 is 0. Simplify the right side. What's 3 minus 2? 1. Over here, what's negative 3 minus 2? All right, if you're not sure, use a calculator, but it's negative 5. All right, and then write your answer with those curly braces. Now, the x values that make this true are 1 and negative 5. Any questions? All right, so that's what we did yesterday. Yesterday we did a lot more like leading up to that, but that's essentially what we're doing, is we're solving for the x values just a different way, which is called completing the square. Down here for number 7 and number 8, these are just slightly more complicated, but it's still the same process. All right, our first step is still to rewrite it into this format. Yes, when Jess comes back. So we're going to rewrite it into this format. I have to move quite a few things. All right, one thing I will tell you is try to keep that x squared term positive. All right, it can't be negative because you can't take the square root of a negative, at least not in algebra 1. All right, so we are going to rearrange this. What is something that I have to move? I need to move the 71. How can I move it? Take that out and close your window. All right, so how can I make it cancel on the left side? So we're going to subtract 71 from both sides. I also have to move something else. What else do I have to move? The 18x. So we need the x squared term and the x term on the left side, and we need the constants on the right side. So I'm going to do that in the same step, just so I can kind of save some room. So how can I get rid of the 18x on the right side? By subtracting it. And what I do on one side, I have to do to the other. All right, and then simplify. So on the left side, can the x squared term be combined with anything? No, so I just write it there. Can the negative 18x be combined with anything on the left? No, so we just write it right next to it, minus 18x. These can be combined. 71 minus 71 is 0, right? That's what we wanted. We wanted no constants on the left. That's why we did that. On the right side, we can combine these. 18x minus 18x is what? 0, so they cancel out. That's good. That's the whole purpose of doing that. And then we can combine the constants, right? So what's negative 9 minus 71? Negative 80. All right? So that's the first step. We just rewrote it, and yeah, it took a little longer, but that's because it just wasn't in the right order to begin with, right? So that's why it took longer. Yes. All right, so now we're going to move on to step 2, which is to take half of b, square it, and add it to both sides. Okay, then take your head up. All right, so what is my b value in number 7? It's negative 18. So I'm going to take half of b, which is negative 18. What's half of b? Negative 9. What's negative 9 squared? Good. And it's a positive 81. If your calculator is saying something weird, like negative 81, make sure you put that number in parentheses before you square it. All right, what do I do with that number? Add it to both sides. So a good test question would be, what number do I have to add to both sides? And we would say we would add 81 to both sides. All right, now simplify it. There's no like terms on the left to combine, so we're just rewriting it. On the right side, what's negative 80 plus 81? Positive 1. All right, so step 2 is complete. Now we need to factor the trinomial. So take the square root of the first and last terms. What's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 81? 9. So I have x and I have 9. What symbol goes in between them? Minus, because that's the sign that's on the middle term. All right, so that's what it looks like factored. This is equal to 1, because that's what we had already. Questions about how we did that? All right, so we factored it, now we're just solving for x. So what's the first step in solving for x? Take the square root from both sides. That's how we cancel out the square that's over here. What do we end up with on the left side? X minus 9, square root of 1 is plus or minus 1, right? All right. So plus or minus 1. Which means we'll break this into 2 equations and solve for the positive answer and solve for the negative answer. All right, do the opposite of what's being done. What's opposite of subtracting 9? Adding it. Do the same on both sides. Cancels out on the left side, so we isolated the x. What's my first x value? Good. And what's my second x value? Negative 1 plus 9 is 8. All right, questions? Yes? I'll add you to the line. All right, so then number 8, I'll have you guys try then. So you try number 8. Give you a couple minutes. All right, for those of you that like to sleep, if you don't have anything written on your papers, I'm going to make you stand for the rest of the class. X plus 1 equals plus or minus 7. All right, solve for x in both cases. They do it slightly different than I do. I have you split it up into 2 separate equations. They move the 1 to the other side, and then they have negative 1 plus or minus 7. That's how they get these 2 answers. They did -1 plus 7, which gives you 6, and -1 minus 7, which gives you -8. All right, you can choose to do that as well. I just like to show you what exactly you're doing. Any questions? All right, if you got the right answer on your first try, good job. All right, if not, just see where the mistake was made so you can avoid making it on the test. All right, so imagine like this all worked out with like some blanks. You would have to say what the next step would be. All right, so now we're gonna go down to this section called irrational solutions. So irrational numbers are things that don't end. So it's like a decimal that never ends. That's like taking the square root of 3, or like the square root of another non-perfect square, like 27. All right. So in those cases, we get like a funky looking answer. We get like you can't take the square root of 5 perfectly, but I can reduce that radical as much as I can, which we've done before. So looking at number 9, we need to follow the same steps that we did earlier. So first step is to rewrite it. What number needs to be moved in order to make that happen? So how do I move it? So add 4 and do that to each side. On the left side, -4 plus 4 cancels out. That's the whole purpose of doing that. And we get x squared minus 2x equals 0 plus 4, which is 4. All right, so we rewrote it. Now we need to do step 2, which is to take half of b. What's the b value? It's -2. What's half of -2? -1. We're going to square it. What's -1 squared? A positive 1, right? What do I do with that positive 1 now? We're going to add it to both sides. So that's what it says to do in the instructions. So our new basic trinomial is x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 5. So 4 plus 1 is 5. Now factor the trinomial. Take the square root of your first and last term. What would that be? Square root of x squared is square root of 1 is, and what sign is going to go in between? Good, because that's a sign that's on the middle term. All right, so we factored it, bring down that 5. Now we're solving for x. All right, so what would be the opposite of squaring something? How do I get this 2 to cancel out? Take the square root. So I'm gonna cancel out that square on the left side. I just have x minus 1. And on the right side, I have the square root of 5. Now, is there a perfect square root of 5? No. If you put it in your calculator, you'll get a long decimal. So what we have to do then is just make sure that the radical is as simplified as possible. So this is kind of a look back into what we did a long time ago. But to simplify radicals, we need to make a factor tree. So what are factors of 5? 5 and 1, right? And then when we make our factor tree, we're looking for pairs of like any prime numbers. Do I have any pairs of the same number? I don't. So that means that this radical is as simplified as it can possibly be already. All right. So we're just going to instead leave it in this symbol. It's going going to be plus or minus because there's going to be a positive answer and a negative answer. And then when we write our answer, we're going to isolate the x. So let me kind of put the plus or minus in front of this radical 5. How can I isolate the x? What's opposite of subtracting 1? So we're going to add 1 to both sides. On the left side, it cancels out. On the right side, I'm just going to write it as 1 plus or minus radical 5. All right, and that'll be the answer for number 9. So you'll want to simplify the radical as much as you can. This time it was already simplified. And then you just write your answer like that. Questions? All right, you don't want the decimals because those aren't exact. You have to round it at some point. So just leave it in that format. Yeah. All right, any questions? Well, we have to do another one together. All right, we'll do number 10 together, and then I'll have you try 11 on your own. All right, so number 10 is slightly different because we do have to reduce the radical. First, we need to follow all these steps first. So we need to rewrite it. What number has to be moved in order to have it in the correct format? So opposite of adding 46 is, all right, do that on each side. On the left, we have x squared plus 16x. What do I have on the right? Negative 46. So 0 minus 46 is negative 46. All right, now we did the first step. Now we're going to do the second step, which is to take half of b, square it, and then add it to both sides. So what's my b value in number 10? What's half of 16? And what's 8 squared? 64. Whatever that number is, we have to add it to both sides. That's what it says in the instructions. And then rewrite your quadratics. All right, so on the left side, I have x squared plus 16x plus 64. What do I get on the right side? Negative 46 plus 64 is positive 18. All right, that's correct. Factor your trinomial. That's step 3. So take the square root of your first and last term. What do I get when I factor it? X plus 8 squared. Right? Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 64 is 8. The sign that goes in the middle depends on the sign on the middle term. All right, equal to 18, so that's what was already there. Solving for x, we're undoing what's being done. That's how we cancel out the square part. I get x plus 8 equal to the square root of 18. Now, is that a perfect square? No. So what I need to do is make my factor tree. What numbers multiply to give me 18? Are they both prime? So 6 can be broken down into, and I'm looking for pairs of the same number. remember you need like a partner to escape from jail. So a pair of 3s. Any other pairs of prime numbers? So we'll have a 3 outside the radical. That's what escaped. What number did not escape? The 2. We don't care about the 6 because that's not a prime number. All right, but we care about the 2 because it is a prime number. So that's how you simplify that radical. All right, put that plus or minus symbol. Isolate your x. What's opposite of adding 8? So then I have x equal to -8 plus or minus 3 radical 2. All right, I don't know that we'll get that complicated on the test, but I wouldn't put it past since we are. Question. All right, now actually I'll save the you try for one that's on your practice. So on your practice, whether you chose to do evens or odds, do number 15. All right, if you did evens, you can just do 15 instead of 15, that's fine. So try 15 from your practice. We'll go over it in a few minutes, and then finish the rest of your practice, just the evens or the odds, but everyone do number 15. If you get stuck, do ask. I don't expect you to just sit there and wait until we go over it. Yes. When Ray you're after baby. After baby. You probably need to take half of 4, square it, and then add 4. And that, no, 6 squared is 3 or 4. So then you'll add 4 to both sides. So you'll add 4 to this side, which is just right. Add 4 on the other. And then equals 28 plus 4, which is 1. So equals. So you guys right now are trying number 15 on your practice. Yes? Yeah. So step 2 is once you've rewritten it, well, you haven't finished written it. Well, first, so when you're rewriting it, it's supposed to be ax squared plus 2x. So the constants are supposed to be on the other side. Did you have your hand up over there? Not fine. But the first step is always to rewrite it. You want it to be rewritten so that the x terms are on the left side and that the constants are on the right side. So what number has to be moved in number 15? The 7. How can I move it? By adding it, right? That's how it gets rid of it on the left side, because -7 plus 7 is 0. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So on the left side, -7 plus 7 cancels out. We have x squared minus 4x equals to what? 21 plus 7 is 28. All right, so good. Now we need to do step 2, which says to take half of whatever the b value is and square it. Then add it to both sides. So what's my b value? Would be the number in front of the x. -4. That's the number in front of the x. What's half of -4? And then what is -2 squared? A +4, right? So this is the number that I will add to both sides. Because that's what step 2 says to do. If it seems like weird, why would I do that? That's how we're completing the square. So on the left side, you shouldn't have to combine anything on the left side. You just have to write it next to it. On the right side, what's 28 plus 4? 32. Now factor your trinomial. Take the square root of your first and last term. What's the square root of x squared? And what's the square root of 4? And the sign that's on the middle term. So put a minus sign, it's x minus 2 squared, that's how you factor it, equal to 32. All right, so everyone understand those steps so far? All right, now solve for the x. So undo what's being done. To get rid of that to the power of 2, I have to take the square root. On the left side, I have x minus 2. Now on the right side, 32 isn't a perfect square, so I have to simplify that radical. How do I simplify radicals? Making a factor tree. So what are two numbers that multiply to 32? There's no wrong answers. 8 and 4, good. I'll do 16 and 2. 16 breaks into what? 4 and 4 both break into 2 and 2. All right, we want to break numbers down until they can't be broken down anymore other than like more than themselves. And you don't write it as more than itself. All right, so we're looking at the ends of our branches, right? We don't look at the 16 for or the 32 because those aren't prime. We're looking for pairs between the ends of our branches. So do I have pairs of the same numbers? I have a pair of 2's here. Anything else? Another pair of 2's, and then I have a lonely 2. So if you have a pair, you get to leave the jail, right? You escape. And I have 2 pairs. So we're going to count it once for each pair. So a pair of 2's escaped, another pair of 2's escaped. And we have this one that did not escape, so it's still under the radical. Outside, 2 times 2 is. So then this is my radical that goes here. So plus or minus 4 radical 2. What's the opposite of subtracting 2? So add 2 to both sides. Cancels out on the left side. And then since this one's kind of a weird problem, we just leave it in this format. All right, any questions? right, if you did not finish the practice, do finish it and turn it in as homework.